From Sophia, the celestial mother of all living things, was born the one who became the fashioner and ruler of the system of creation. His mother was in great sorrow and anguish when she brought him forth, for she was alone in an abyss of darkness, and her light was diminished. Her offspring appeared before her, and she saw that he was a shape-changer, for he appeared in the shape of a serpent with the face of a lion, and out of his eyes there came forth lightning flashes. And Sophia repented of her desire to bring forth a being in her loneliness, and she wept and lamented over her offspring, whom she named Yaldabaoth, which means child lord. Yaldabaoth then went forth into the chaos and fashioned a system of creation that was to his own liking. And into it he placed 12 authorities, 7 kings of the firmament and 5 kings of the abyss. All of these, with their children, were called rulers, for their desire for power and authority was great. The fashioner and his host then mingled light with darkness, so that the darkness would appear radiant, and thus could deceive the eye. This mixture of light and darkness resulted in a world that was imperfect and weak, for the darkness prevented it from developing an armor of light that might protect it. And great indeed became the weakness of this world, for the darkness that was everywhere mixed with the light invited terrible, evil powers and beings from beyond the system of the world. Thus, Yaldabaoth stood in the midst of the world system he fashioned, and grew arrogant in his pride as he exclaimed, "I am God, and there is no other God beside me." Thus he demonstrated his ignorance of the true character of being and his pride, whereby he denied even his own mother, Sophia. She, however, looked down on him from on high and exclaimed with a loud voice, "Thou hast uttered a falsehood, O Samael." It was thus that he received the name that makes him the blind lord of death. And then Sophia also called him by the name of Saklas, whereby she affirmed his foolishness. Sophia, however, knowing that her offspring had fashioned a creation in his own flawed image, decided to secretly come to the aid of the light that was present in the world. She descended from her habitation and came close to the earth, moving to and fro over it, and thereby conferred her wisdom and love upon the system that the foolish fashioner created. It was her mighty spirit that moved upon the face of the waters, as was stated in the account of creation rendered by Moses. The rulers thought that they alone created and ordered the world, but the spirit of Sophia secretly contrived to place splendid archetypical patterns in the fabric of their work. Then a great wonder appeared in the heavens, the form of a man, majestic and glorious to behold. And the image was accompanied by a voice that exclaimed, "The man exists, and the Son of Man." The Creator and his host trembled, and the foundations of the abyss shook, and the waters churned in terror upon the earth. So great was the radiance of the celestial human archetype that appeared in the heavens, that the rulers were blinded by it, and they could not bear its power. They averted their eyes and beheld the reflection of the form of the man as it appeared in the waters below. All the rulers and their servants rushed hither and gathered their powers and made a replica of the image of the heavenly man. But their work was faulty and feeble, because the force of Sophia was not in their creation. The counterfeit man was dull and insensate, and crawled on the earth like a worm. Sophia then sent down several of her messengers of light, and they secretly entered in the mind of Yaldabaoth, causing him to breathe into the pitiful creature, thus bestowing life upon him. The fashioner thought that it was he who endowed man with life, but in reality it was his mother, Sophia, who gave humanity true life. And the man stood up, walked, and was surrounded by an unearthly light. Yaldabaoth and his host now came to recognize that the man was in fact a being whose spiritual power and intelligence exceeded their own. Filled with envy and rage, they attacked the man whose name was Adam, and cast him into the darkest region of matter, there to languish in sorrow and deprivation. But Sophia, in cooperation with the highest powers of the fullness, sent a helper to Adam to instruct and assist him with wisdom and spiritual strength. The helper was a woman who came to be known as Eve, but whose true name is Zoe, meaning life. The wise feminine spirit entered Adam and was concealed in him, so that the rulers could not recognize her presence. The rulers now conspired and devised a plan whereby they hoped that the man could be deceived and remain a captive to their designs. They made a garden filled with the beauties and delights of the earth and placed Adam in the midst of it, providing him with every kind of pleasant object he could desire. But the beauty and the pleasures they offered him were deceptive and corrupt, and designed to keep him a captive of the rulers, without a will and a life of his own. A tree was also planted by them in the garden that contained their life, and that they forbade Adam to touch or eat the fruit of. Once again, Sophia and the other heavenly powers came into the aid of Adam, and they instructed him to eat of the fruit of the tree and defy the ruler and his tyrant angels. At the same time, the woman came forth from Adam, but the chief of the rulers recognized her as having the light of Sophia in her, and he was enraged. He pursued her all over the garden, having subdued her, raped her, and she conceived 2 sons by him, whose true names were Elohim and Yahweh, although they became known as Cain and Abel. But the shining spirit of wisdom that inhabited Eve fled while this ravishment took place, so that the only human Eve was thus shamed, but not Zoe, the living spirit. Elohim Cain became master over earth and water, and from him descended men and women whose inclination is towards matter, whereas Yahweh Abel commanded fire and air and became the father of humans who value the soul and mind. Adam, however, recognized what the tyrant ruler had done and subsequently fathered a son by the name of Seth, whose inclination was towards spirit, and who became the father of those who desire gnosis and who strive for union with spirit. The tyrant angels then watched in rage as humankind went its way, and would no longer linger in the fool's paradise where the fashioner wished to keep them captive. The chief ruler particularly cursed the woman who became the mother of humankind, and her lot, and the lot of her daughters has been a difficult one ever since. Nevertheless, Eve gave birth to a daughter named Norea, who was filled with true gnosis, and who remained on earth for a long time as a helper of humanity, because she was wise and knew the schemes and true evil and the evil works of the tyrant angels. Meanwhile, humans multiplied, and, instructed by Seth and Norea, many turned to gnosis, so that the rulers had few men and women who would accept them as divine and follow their laws. The tyrants gathered and declared that they wished to destroy all humans who were not subservient to them. They caused a deluge, from which they intended to save only those who were still beholden to them, among whom was a man named Noah. The chief ruler approached Noah and told him to build an ark whereby to save himself and his companions from the deluge. Norea, however, learned of this, and in order to frustrate their designs, she first attempted to dissuade Noah from constructing the ark. But when she did not succeed in her attempt, she blew fire upon the ark he had built so that it burned. Noah, however, being stubborn, built a second ark. The evil angels then assaulted Norea, wishing to ravish her as they did her mother Eve. But a great angel of light named Elelith rescued her and gave her strength to continue with her mission. the knowers of truth hid themselves in a luminous cloud high above the mountains and were saved from the flood. So with the help of Norea, the scheme of the tyrant angels was frustrated. Ever since those days, humankind lived in conflict and division, for the chief ruler had divided it in wrath. True gnosis became rare, and the children of men learned about useless and dead things, and their knowledge became worldly and corrupt. Still, the human race was never left alone, for it had helpers in the high aeons. Not only Sophia and her angels, but some tyrant angels also turned from the evil of their chief and returned to the service of the light. The greatest of these was the brother of Yaldabaoth, and he is named Sabaoth, and also Abraxas. This spirit renounced the works of his blind and evil brother and submitted to his mother Sophia, who appointed him the ruler of the seventh heaven, from whence he ever calls after the fashion of a celestial chanticleer, to all beings, so that they might awaken and renounce the works of darkness. At a later time, conflict arose between the children of men who still served the tyrant angels and those who had been liberated by Gnosis. The servants of Yaldabaoth betrayed the knowers, and the rulers rained fire and brimstone on them, hoping to destroy them. Abraxas Sabaoth, assisted by other mighty angels of light, rescued them, so that the plan of the rulers once again came to naught. This became known as the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Time and again the rulers rallied and schemed to destroy those humans who would not serve them. They wished to corrupt the whole human race by mingling their essence with humanity, and they abducted many human women and procreated giants who were filled with malice. These giants became the ancestors of those men who selfishly despoil the earth and deprive good men and women of their possessions and sustenance. Owing to the manifold evil schemes and depredations of the rulers, a certain portion of the human race is contaminated by their seed, although all men and women possess in addition the spark of Sophia. The rulers, however, are truly tyrants. Their deepest desire is to subjugate and rule the children of men whom they mistrust and despise, for they are superior in essence to the rulers themselves. Thus the rulers are ever at work devising laws and commandments whereby they might constrain the children of men. They masquerade as messengers of light, or even as the true God himself, and demand obedience and worship. They thus deceived many well-intentioned prophets and seers, and came to dominate large numbers of humans. The law of Moses was, at least in part, similarly inspired by the rulers, for Moses could not make distinction between true transcendental God and the chief of the tyrant Archons. Jesus, who descended from the high aeons, came to advance the defeat of the tyrant angels by teaching humans how they might become free, and by bringing them mysteries that would act as weapons against the wiles of such adversaries. The chief ruler, in his blindness, did not discern that Jesus was of such a high and divine origin. He assumed him to be merely a troublesome human who could be murdered. He thus incited the priests and Pharisees to condemn Jesus to death. Jesus, being other than human, did not die, although he permitted the illusion of his physical death. He returned in glory and completed his work of redemption in spite of the plans of his enemies. The assault on his person had brought such consequences upon his persecutors, however, that soon the temple at Jerusalem was destroyed, and the circumstances changed in such a way that many could renounce the old law that was influenced by the rulers. The spiritual freedom brought by Jesus only prevailed for a brief period of history, and the tyrant angels began to corrupt the message of the good news once more. The battle of the forces of light against the tyrant Archons continues, but the outcome is not in question. The forces of redemption are destined to prevail, bringing gnosis and liberation to the sparks of light hidden in humanity. Defeat will come to the blind and foolish tyrant angels who have for so long ruled in their kingdom where, like usurpers, they establish their illegitimate dominion.